Labour declares crises. Labour in panic mood issues a crisis statement as today's news causes fear. Is Labour starting to lose its grip on power, or is this simply another desperate attempt to maintain control? As the party faces increasing criticism for yet another contentious decision, the atmosphere is charged with fear and frustration. The recent choice to stifle any discussion about eliminating the winter heating stipend for seniors has sparked outrage across the political spectrum. Imagine the scene. Parliament is bustling, filled with members ready to debate a matter of crucial importance. Suddenly, Labour steps in and shuts the door on any discussion. It feels as if they've thrown a political grenade into the chamber and exited without a word. The backlash is palpable, not only from the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, who are rightly outraged, but also from Labour's own ranks. Many MPs are calling for the issue to be debated publicly, but Labour is resisting, further alienating itself from its constituents. At the heart of this crisis is Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who finds herself defending a decision that many deem heartless. She argues that the only way to address the so-called black hole in public finances, blamed on 14 years of Conservative governance, is to cut the winter heating payments for seniors. This reasoning, however, is hard to swallow. Targeting the elderly, who are among the most vulnerable in society, to balance budgets feels cruel, especially when many depend on this assistance to keep their homes warm during the harsh winter months. Reeves frames these cuts as necessary for the greater good, but her justification rings hollow to many. It suggests that financial figures take precedence over the welfare of those who have dedicated their lives to serving society. Critics argue that such an approach reveals a neglectful attitude towards the elderly, who rely on this support more than ever as living costs continue to rise. The dissent within Labour is growing. Shadow Treasury Minister Laura Trott has not hesitated to voice her concerns, suggesting that the party has been preparing for these cutbacks while trying to evade responsibility. Her remarks challenge the leadership directly, accusing them of prioritizing political reputation over genuine public service. This internal rift reflects a broader sentiment. Labour appears more focused on maintaining power than on addressing the needs of the people. York Central MP Rachel Maskell has joined the chorus of dissent, warning that this issue won't simply resolve itself. She paints Labour as behaving like a nanny state, more interested in enforcing its agenda than protecting its constituents. The perception that the party is out of touch with the needs of the public is widening the divide within its ranks. Adding fuel to the fire is the return of former leader Jeremy Corbyn, who, alongside a coalition of left-wing MPs, is challenging Labour's direction. This independent alliance is gaining traction in Parliament and has made its stance clear. Cuts to essential services for the vulnerable are unacceptable. Their vocal criticism of the government's handling of the winter fuel allowance reduction underscores a growing movement that seeks to amplify the voices of those often ignored in political discourse. Public response to Labour's decision has been intense. Advocacy groups, particularly those representing the elderly, have mobilized, gathering over 500,000 signatures on a petition demanding the government reconsider its stance. This is not merely a quiet complaint, it reflects a deep-seated outrage from citizens who feel betrayed. As winter approaches, the stakes are high for the elderly in society. For many, the winter heating allowance is the difference between comfort and hardship. The fear of having to choose between heating their homes and buying food is real and pressing. This sentiment is echoed in the growing anxiety that Labour is abandoning its most vulnerable constituents. The political landscape is shifting, with Corbyn's coalition emerging as a significant force challenging the status quo. They are not just criticizing, they are actively seeking to reshape the conversation around policies that impact ordinary lives. Their resurgence is a direct response to the frustration felt by many who feel left behind by traditional politics. As this crisis unfolds, the question remains: will Labour heed the warnings from within and outside its ranks, or will it continue down a path that risks alienating its base further? The implications of these decisions will resonate well beyond this political cycle, affecting the very fabric of British society. The urgency for a more equitable and compassionate approach has never been clearer, and the pressure is mounting for Labour to respond. Chancellor is set to introduce ESA accounts next week, according to reports, as she delivers her autumn statement. A dangerous ISA shake-up could be introduced by Chancellor Rachel Reeves as we head deeper into autumn. The new Labour Party Chancellor is set to introduce ISA accounts next week, according to reports, as she delivers her autumn statement. Ms. Reeves could target ISAs in her budget next week after previously floating a £500,000 lifetime limit on the tax-free accounts. Ms. Reeves called for a £500,000 limit on the amount that savers could put into the tax-free wrappers in an article for The Independent in 2016. Savers and investors have a £20,000 annual allowance to channel into ISAs every year. Jason Hollins, of wealth manager Evelyn Partners, said, "Meddling with ISAs would be quite dangerous for any chancellor to do. It would very visibly be something that would not be popular. Currently, there is no lifetime limit. However, if one was introduced, it could spell the end of investors accruing seven-figure tax-free sums inside the wrappers." Sarah Coles, from Hargreaves Lansdowne, said, "It runs the risk that it affects those who are considering investing." When Ms. Reeves wrote the article in 2016, the ISA limit was just £15,000. She said the government should introduce a lifetime allowance of £500,000 for ISA investments and freeze the annual limit at £15,000 for the remainder of this parliament. She added the government should match the first £100 that each saver puts in an ISA for basic rate taxpayers. A spokesman for the Treasury said, "Decisions on tax are made in the round at the budget. Over 250,000 people have at least £250,000 in their ISA, with 30,000 savers holding between £500,000 and £750,000. A £500,000 cap could affect long-term savers more than expected." Hargreaves Lansdowne calculates that an investor contributing just half of the current annual allowance for 25 years, assuming 5% annual growth, would breach this limit. Keir Starmer drops biggest hint yet of where Labour will unleash tax hikes in budget. Sir Keir Starmer has admitted people who own shares and assets wouldn't come within my definition of working people. The Prime Minister, giving his clearest indication yet of who may be hit with punishing tax hikes in next week's budget, said he believed a working person was somebody who goes out and earns their living, usually paid in a sort of monthly check. But they do not have the ability to write a check to get out of difficulties, he said. Labour insisted tax rises will not impact working people as he vowed not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance. Asked whether he would classify a working person as someone whose income derived from assets, such as shares or property, the Prime Minister said, "Well, they wouldn't come within my definition." Pressed on whether that meant taxes for those people could go up, the Prime Minister said, "You can probably give me any number of examples. You're asking me for a definition of who's a working person, and then you're making assumptions about what that tax might be in relation to. Inheritance tax, charged on the estate of someone who has died, and capital gains tax, imposed on the profit from the sale of capital assets, have been touted as the two most likely to see a rise." Asked if he thinks entrepreneurs may want to leave the UK following the reported tax increases, Sir Keir told reporters, "There is no reason for them to." Labour's election manifesto said the party would not increase taxes on working people and included a commitment not to increase national insurance, income tax or VAT. The Chancellor said she faced difficult choices but insisted her budget would begin to fix the NHS and start to rebuild our economy. The cost of government borrowing increased in response to speculation the Chancellor would change debt rules to spend billions more on investments. Tory former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said increased borrowing could increase the cost of mortgages for hundreds of thousands of households. During a round of broadcast interviews while attending the International Monetary Fund meeting in Washington, D.C., Ms. Reeves confirmed a technical change in the way she would measure progress against the target of managing debt. Writing in the Financial Times, Ms. Reeves said her fiscal rules would be the rock of stability at the core of my budget. Labour's 2024 election manifesto said Ms. Reeves would follow two rules. The current budget would be in balance so that day-to-day costs are met by revenues. The second rule is that debt must be falling as a share of the economy by the fifth year of the economic forecast. On Thursday she confirmed that the way debt is measured as part of that target would be changed to allow greater flexibility. Ms. Reeves said, "My fiscal rules will do two things. The first and most important, my stability rule will mean that day-to-day spending will be matched by revenues. Given the state of the public finances and the need to invest in our public services, this rule will bite hardest. Alongside tough decisions on spending and welfare, that means taxes will need to rise to ensure this rule is met. I will always protect working people when I make these choices, while taking a balanced approach. Crucially, my stability rule will also cover the interest on our national debt, and unlike the previous government, I won't cut capital budgets to make up for shortfalls in the day-to-day running costs of departments. My second fiscal rule, the investment rule, will get debt falling as a proportion of our economy. That will make space for increased investment in the fabric of our economy, and ensure we don't see the falls in public sector investment that were planned under the last government, she told ITV News. Our second rule, our investment rule, will change the way in which we measure government debt so we take into account our assets, not just the costs of investment. She is expected to target public sector net financial liabilities, PSNFL, as her new benchmark for government debt rather than the current measure of underlying public sector net debt. A shift to PSNFL would give her greater headroom to meet her debt reduction target, because it includes a wider mix of state assets and liabilities, notably including expected student loan repayments to offset some of the liability. Had PSNFL been used as the debt target in the March 2024 budget, the headroom, the margin by which the fiscal rule is met, would have increased by £53 billion according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies.